Hello, it's Nadine, and I'm here with this week's episode of Life, Health, and the Universe. And I'm joined by my guest this week, Shandra Moran. Is that how I pronounce it?
Perfect.
Oh, good. And so welcome. Shandra is an owner of a business called the Transit Lounge. And I'm going to tell our listeners what I think I know about you, and then I'm going to hand over to you. And I have to be honest, even though we've known each other for a long time, I probably know more things about your husband than I do about
That doesn't
you.
sound dodgy at all.
That doesn't sound very dodgy, does it? Because he used to, Chandra's husband used to come to our gym. So we've known each other through some social engagements and more recently through being in a business women's network together. But don't know a whole bunch about you, it seems. So I'm going to tell you what I think I do know.
Okay.
That you're an entrepreneur. We've already, we know that you own a business called the Transit Lounge. I think you worked in radio.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a dog called Katu. Is it
Ketu?
Katu. You like puzzles. You're probably thinking, why does she say that? And you've got lots of energy, and that's all the things I know about you. There are probably some more, but I don't want to get too personal on here and share all your secrets.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
So I'm going to hand over to you, and then we'll get stuck into our chat.
Well, you did quite well, Nadine, with the random bits of Shandra trivia. It is correct. I did work in radio for almost 10 years. And then I had what I describe as an early midlife crisis, where I decided that although I was quite successful in, I guess, many people's opinion in my radio career, I wasn't very happy. And I just had that feeling of oh, is this it? Yeah. And so I left my radio career and sort of went down a path that was very much around human behavior, human development, because I realized that what I'd loved when I was in radio was seeing my team and developing the team. And so at that time, I was curious about, well, what jobs let you do more of that? And it was very early in the era of coaching starting as a profession. And so I trained as a coach and then went and worked and did various things since then. So that's the radio connection. What I do now, as you said, my business is called the Transit Lounge. And it was about 8 years ago, almost, that I started the Transit Lounge. And the reason that happened was that I had been working with in a corporate role as head of people and operations. There's a title for you. But I kept getting sick all the time. And I'm a pretty healthy person, and I didn't understand why I was getting sick all the time. And I eventually, after a pretty rocky road of just not feeling like myself, I got some tests done and was diagnosed with severe adrenal fatigue. Oh. And that led me to have what I call some shut up, think and feel time. And Mick and I, who you've mentioned, went to Bali on a bit of a okay, let's just regroup. And I came back with my 5-point wellness plan with a bonus 6th point, and tried to sort of make things work in the job, but it didn't work. And so I ended up leaving that career to start the Transit Lounge, and that was about 8 years ago. And so I work now with career women who have had a great career, but are at a point where they've decided that they want to have their own business for the next chapter of their work life. And so I help them to create that business through the startup phase, and I help them through private coaching. And I have an online group program as well called Women in Transit, The Path to Being Your Own Boss.
Cool. Do you want to tell us anything about what I said about puzzles?
So yes, I actually really do enjoy jigsaw puzzles. But I haven't done one for a long time because, annoyingly, Mick does not like jigsaw puzzles. And so I end up having, these 1,000-piece or whatever things, and they hang around for ages. Helps. It's not as fun when it's just me. So I haven't done one for a while, but maybe these holidays I will.
Cool. And the reason I said puzzles is because when we had a party at our place in Sydney a few years back, there was a big word search on the, it was a word search or something that we drew on a big blackboard outside
Yes.
the garden, and
Yep.
you were on it, girl. You answered all the questions. You were not leaving that thing until they were done.
Yeah, I can be a bit obsessive like that. It's like, no, I've got to figure this out, especially things that are like, once they get into my head. I had a similar thing when I was back home visiting my parents earlier this year, and they just moved into a new house, and they had this door that went through from their main living area through to a garage area, and it had one of those keypad locks on it, but they couldn't get it to work. So they literally had just been chocking this door open. Anyway, that was like, right, let me at this. Literally, we were up till so late, but Dad and I figured it out, and I was like, yes, it's that feeling of satisfaction, right?
Totally.
That when you solve this puzzle or this tricky thing. So you have pegged me right. I do like a puzzle.
But that wasn't the main reason for inviting you here for this conversation, but it's always good to know who we're dealing with.
Yes. Yes.
And you've proven that you've got lots of energy too, which is great. Love a bit of energy. So you put your hand up to come and have a chat with me, and I love all of the things that you've said so far, and so many things. It's funny, isn't it, how things align? And you talked about early midlife crisis, and you work with women in their 40s, and you've talked about, you know, your health with adrenal fatigue. You talked about human behavior. These are all things that I am passionate about as well, and I don't know where to start. So let's start with your own story with the adrenal fatigue and the things that you did in Bali, because that sounds really interesting when you came back with your 5-point plan with the one extra point. Yes. Because I think that this, and you've actually, would I be right in saying that the women that you work with, that you're helping now, are typically women that have been in careers where they're experiencing the same thing as you, which you refer to as burnout?
For some of them, yes. For others, it's not necessarily a health challenge, but it's more of either an energetic or a lifestyle point that they get to where they're either jack of being answerable to somebody else about when they have to work and where and for how long and all that sort of thing. And they just want more of that freedom and flexibility to call their own shots, right? Or to design their work life around a schedule that works for them. One of my clients, Tanya, is an absolute true night owl. In saying that, what I mean is, like, she optimally will stay up and work till 2 a.m., maybe 3 a.m. And she really comes into her own like after 10 p.m. at night, but then she sleeps in and whatever. And like, it's not just she leaves things to the last minute and so has to do it like that. She genuinely just taps into a different bucket of energy and creativity at that time, which I cannot understand at all. So you can appreciate for someone like her being answerable to go, well, the work day starts at 8:30 or 9:30. She's like, I've been to bed for 2 hours, whatever.
Wow.
So for some people, it's more around actually just going, I actually want to be able to craft my own hours and do the sort of work that I believe in. For others, they, have had health challenges. And for others, it's just getting to a point where there's something they've done for a career, and that was great while it lasted, but there's something else that they're really passionate about. So another client that I've got, Kate, she's an architect by trade, but she, in her adult life, fell in love with dance. And so she has started a dance studio, particularly for mums, but she also does a lot of stuff with kids now as well in school groups, because she's very much about positive body image and, that dance is, and her tagline I love is fitness dipped in fun.
Yes.
And she just is all about move your body in a way that feels fun to you. So anyway, that's an example where her business is very different to her previous career. So there's a bit of a eclectic mix, I guess, of the types of women, but they can all appreciate that feeling of misalignment, of I'm spending a lot of time and a lot of energy doing something that no longer feels satisfying to me or right for me. And that, as scary as it might be to start something new, they want to do that, and they're just looking for support and connection with others that are doing a similar thing and that they can learn from, to take the fast track, if you like.
Cool. I want to talk more about that. So let's just go with it, because I was going to ask you about the health stuff, the adrenal fatigue and whatnot, but that the alignment and all of that, like how, a woman comes to a point in her life, and I think it happens with men a bit as well. And you nailed it when you said the midlife crisis, right? Because it's not, is it? It's not a crisis, really. And when you get there, you're kind of like, this is what they were talking about. But it's not. But you totally feel like, what is my purpose? Why am I doing all of this stuff?
Yeah.
When you have women that come to you, are you there before they've even found out what it is that they want to do? Are they just kind of like, I know that there's something more, and you're like, hey, I'm going to help you find that thing?
Yeah. So for some of them, they're at what I would call a career crossroads, where they are aware that they're unhappy or unsatisfied with what they've been doing or are doing, and they want to do something different, but perhaps they're not quite sure yet. And so for those kinds of women, that would be more private coaching conversations, because it's very much about them looking at their values, what's really most important to them, what does success look like on their terms, how much actual time do they want to be dedicating to the work side of their life for the next chapter, and crafting what does that ideal future them look like. I talk a lot about the 3 U's. There's the present you, there's the past you, and there's future you. And so helping people to tap into this ideal future you. What is she doing with her time? Who is she working with? What's she helping them do or achieve? And those sorts of lines of inquiry can sometimes be useful to start to get a bit of a sense of what does bubble up as most important, which may be very different from what they've been doing. I mean, certainly it was for me.
Yeah, I do that with my clients, actually, like talk about what they want, how do they visualize themselves in 10 years time, like from a health perspective. And I read a quote recently, and it was something like, if you don't know what you want, you'll get what you get, or something like that. It was something really profound like it was that. Like, well, if you don't plan it, like you could end up somewhere you definitely don't want to be.
But generally,
sorry, go.
Generally, if you're not driving your own bus, if you like, you will end up where other people want you to be. Whether that is a boss that has decided here is the career trajectory for you, or a partner or family or whoever that just kind of goes, well, this is where we're going. And you, in the absence of you having your own compass, then that's when you do get swept up in other people's expectations. And so that's another big one that I tend to like to shake people out of and go, actually, yes, you can have all those other things, but don't do it just by default. Actually, spend some time crafting that vision for yourself.
Be clear about whether it's actually your choice or someone else's. Well, you could easily, your entire life could be that, right? Otherwise, and you get carried off. And
many people do.
And I think that that's partly what happens, and I've talked about this with a number of my guests, is that in the beginning of your days, you're kind of, there's expectations. You go to school, you go to uni, you get married, you get a job, you buy a house, you have a career, and then by the time you get to 40-ish, you're like, okay, done all of the things. Do I really want to keep doing all of the things? Or because you could just get carried along into the, okay, it's time to retire, time to get old, time to die. Whereas we've got a lot more choice than that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. But you have to be quite brave, I think, to acknowledge that, a level of discontent or misalignment, and to then to look at it and kind of go, what will it take for me to reinvent my professional life at this age? And for me, like, I think it's quite exciting, because by the time you're in your 40s or your 50s, you really should ideally know yourself, to know what you care about, what you don't, and to potentially, have that sense of willingness to step into your own identity. But for some people, it also opens up challenges, because they're used to a certain level of lifestyle that their income provides for. And so the idea of losing that very secure income is not necessarily appealing or easy necessarily straight away for everyone. So there's pros and cons, I think, with the later in life reinvention, but I'm a fan.
Yay. And you started yours early, because you said that you had your early midlife crisis. What happened?
Well, I've had two.
Okay.
So my first one, my early one, was when I left radio.
How old were you then?
I was early 30s.
Yep.
And then trained as a coach, then went and ended up working with the learning and development company. And then when I left them, I was early 40s.
Yep.
So I just turned 50 this year. So I reckon I've still got room for one more midlife crisis.
I reckon. And who says it's midlife anyway? Come on.
Exactly.
Not even halfway.
Well, actually, my doctor that I saw a while ago, I don't have a regular GP because I'm normally pretty healthy and don't really need one. I have a naturopath that I see regularly. So I went to this woman to get some tests done and results and whatever. And she said to me, she said, right, so you're at the age now where everything starts going wrong. And I just looked at her like, oh, you have not met me. But I was like, how sad that that's the message that's going out there, that, okay, it's all down from here.
Yes, that's right. Your hormones are going to change, your bones are going to go brittle, and then you'll lose your mind. Yes.
Yeah, very cheery. Yeah.
Oh, but you do have to wear some brown corduroy as well.
Oh, I must get some.
Yeah, I'm not buying any of that either. But you're right. It's it's just instilled in us, isn't it? That's the trajectory. And I guess they do go on a look, like they do some studies and take averages and whatnot. So I suppose they got something. But yeah. I ain't one of those statistics.
No, you and I are going to change those statistics over time. Yes. Get a few more people into the gene pool that are, in their prime in their second half of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. So what happened when you had your first midlife crisis, your early...
the leaving radio?
One? Yeah. Like, did you just know that there was something not right? Or was it like you were worn out? Or was it the people?
Yeah, so with that one, radio was amazing. I really genuinely loved working in radio. It really suited my personality and vibe. It was very high energy. Radio it's a 24/7 living, breathing thing that needs to be fueled with current information and activity. And so it was very dynamic, and I loved that for quite a long time. And I am a self-professed workaholic. I love working. I always have. And so radio allowed me to indulge in that workaholism for nearly a decade. And I just pushed it. And I had very little in my life other than radio. And so it all was happy families, because radio wanted every hour of my life and I was happy to give it. But radio lives and dies by 8 ratings results throughout the year that are their survey ratings that tell them, well, how many people are listening to what radio station for how long. And that's when, if you ever hear about ratings results, that's what that links to. And so we would literally on the ratings results day, we would sit around waiting to be, this is how old I am. I don't even know if they still do it this way, but they would ring through the results. And so the GM and myself would be in a locked office waiting for this super confidential information to be phoned through, and you get all these stats. And I remember having multiple times where we'd have these amazing survey results. And we did that when I was program director, which is running and implementing the station strategy and managing all the on-air talent and overseeing the marketing and all of that. We would wait for these results, and we just, each time was getting better and better. And I just felt neutral. And I remember thinking, I'm pretty sure this is not how I'm meant to be feeling when we're getting great results. And I could look around and I was seeing other people that were hearing these results, and they were loving life, high-fiving themselves. This is the best. They were relishing in the joy of it. And it was great. But for me, it just was like, oh. And I started thinking, okay, I'm not a neutral kind of person. So if this is what I'm feeling when we're getting really great results, the question of, is this it? And I think also I started, if we're honest, I had met Mick. So really it's all his fault. And
you wanted to hang out with Mick.
Well, it opened up. It was a long distance relationship for 2 years.
Wow.
So that enabled my radio obsession to continue. But I think it opened up a part of me, quite literally, that made me think, oh, maybe this whole radio thing is not as sustainable as I might have thought it was. And then there was this little whisper voice of like, maybe you should leave radio, do something else. And my brain was like, no, time out. Don't think that. And it really opened up this line of thinking about, okay, if I was to quit Nova, who I worked with, who am I? Like literally, that was the question that I had kicking around. Who am I without radio? Because so much of my identity was tied up with the attachment to my role and my success and the brand when we launched. I mean, I launched Nova in Perth. And that was the first radio station to launch in Perth in over 20 years. And it was very exciting. And the Red Hot Chili Peppers were there live, launching, playing the first, hour of music. I didn't buy a movie ticket, a concert ticket, a CD, nothing for my entire radio career.
Wow.
And so and I met lots of amazing people. So it was very, addictive probably. And so then when I started to think, okay, well, what happens if I'm not Shandra from radio, Shandra from Nova? When people asked, so what do you do? What would I say? And I really realized that I had so little outside of my work because I had allowed it to take over. And I think those little germs of ideas really and questions were planted quite a long time before I made the decision. And in fact, I remember that I got to the point where I thought, okay, my contract was coming up for renewal. And I was thinking, okay, I think that I need to leave radio, but I have no clue what I'm going to do. No clue. So what I'll do is I'll sign a contract for 1 year. And what I'll do is I'll spend that 1 year trying to figure out, well, who am I separate to radio and what do I want to do next? And I'll get all my ducks lined up in a row. And then I don't know why, but something in me, when the contract, and my bosses were saying, hey, we've got to start talking about your contract. And I kept fobbing off for a while. And then this little quiet voice in my brain was basically bullying me, saying, Shandra, if you're only prepared to commit for a year, that's just a cop-out. You may as well leave now. And I was like, what? I had this little, argument in my head. I sound like a crazy person, don't I?
No, you sound like just like me.
And so then
maybe I'm a crazy person too.
Yeah. And then I just decided to say that I had decided not to re-sign my contract. And my bosses, because I was in Perth and the big bosses were here in Sydney, were like, what? Because everything was going great. The results were going really well. The team was super happy. I was living in my hometown, which never happens in radio. Normally you get sent all over the place. So they had, I think, decided that they had plugged this Perth hole forever. And when I just said, I'm not going to re-sign, and I had all the different conversations you know, yeah, all the different things. But one of the things that was great was that one of my big bosses, he was really trying to sort of talk me out of it. And he said on this one time when he kind of knew that it wasn't about more money or anything else. But he looked at me and he literally said, "But what will you do?" And he said it exactly like that. And it was perfect, because the way that he said that got my shackles up, or maybe it was my puzzle thing of like, I'll figure it out. And it made me feel even more resolved.
Like, who does he think he is? I know exactly what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, but it was like, it helped me to not cave in, because I think there was that attitude of like, there is only radio and that's it. And so, yeah, and so that was very helpful. And then when people started finding out that I was leaving, and I think I had, 3 months notice period that I had to work out, people fell into one of two camps. One was people who just said, "Are you insane? You have an awesome job, earning great money in an aspirational, fun industry in your hometown, blah, 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 all the good stuff, all the shiny. Why would you leave this?" And then the other 50% of people were people that were more quietly saying, "Good on you." Because so many people say, I'm jack of this, blah, blah, but they don't do anything about it. But you're doing something, and, I wish I could be so brave to do that, or whatever. So it was really interesting to see how different people responded to my decision.
Yeah,
that was probably a very long answer to your question.
It was quite long, but that's fine. It's better than being quiet, isn't it, really? Especially when we're on a podcast. So I wrote a couple of things down there, and one I think I would love to talk to you more about is your personal insight, like that you had that, like it was almost like that observation of what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you've always had? Were there like things that you'd been doing? Like, sounds like you were pretty busy just with being in the radio, but like in that sort of period of your life, did you do any sort of personal development? Or you said that you're really interested in human behavior, and I guess that probably your own insights help you with other people's behavioral stuff. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, and I think I had done previously, a few different personal development courses, and, read a lot of books in that kind of space. But it's interesting that you raised this question, because thinking back now, I think, I had the first germ of the idea that maybe this is not working for me. And I think I was trying to start to introduce something outside of my work life. And my brother-in-law had been doing a practical philosophy course. And I remember hearing about it and going, what does that even mean? I don't even think I'm sure what philosophy even is. Anyway, one of my sister went to do it as well, and she was talking about it. I thought, this sounds kind of interesting. I think it was like an 8-week course. And so I signed up for that, and it was very hard to get there because radio is always demanding about everything. But it was actually really fascinating, and it introduced me to some different tools and ways of thinking. And I think, again, with hindsight, it was early introduction to a mindfulness practice. And so I think that has started to increase my level of self-awareness and questioning that potentially led to that voice sparking up and going, maybe this is a cop-out and maybe you should just rip it off like a Band-Aid.
Yeah. Because it's quite hard, isn't it? I've noticed, like, we've moved because since we've moved up to Bellingen, we obviously have more time, right? And so it's easy. It seems easier when you've got more time to be more mindful. And I observed, like, as our business, as I started to take on more clients, things were getting busier. It's really easy to get the mindfulness stuff and the personal observation, like, you just don't feel like there's enough room in your head for it. So like, considering you were super busy, like, that's pretty good personal observation. Like, especially in your 30s, like, I don't know that many people
Yeah,
have got that going on.
I think obviously there was part of me that knew that something needed to change.
Mm,
And I think, that course and probably, conversations with some of my family, and with Mick, of really kind of going, that question of, is this it? If this is what my life is for the rest of my life, am I going to be happy with that?
mm,
And being open to asking those questions with it. And I think one of the things is being open to notice, how am I feeling about whatever this current situation is, to just observe it without judgment, which is, the whole part of mindfulness is, without judgment, and also without feeling like you have to do something about it straight away. Because I think that can sometimes be an avoidance strategy of like, well, I don't want to look at that, because then I'm going to have to do something about it. And the reality is, maybe you do, but you don't have to, have a realization and then make a decision and pull the ripcord on your whole career or life, all in one afternoon. And I think that just realizing that you can give yourself some time to let things percolate, to explore, what could I do? And again, that same thing happened when I got my diagnosis later in life. I didn't pull the ripcord straight away. There were strategies that I tried before getting to the point of making the ultimate decision that I did. So I think it just comes down to self-awareness, which I think is, no matter what you're doing professionally or personally, is just a skill and a gift to give yourself, to actually be willing to be exploring and getting to know yourself as well as you can, to make informed decisions then that are going to feel aligned, and that you can have what feels like a rich and fulfilling life for you, which might not be what someone else thinks is rich and fulfilling. Like for you guys, when you made the move, I'm sure people fell into a couple of different camps about
yes,
about, oh my God, that's amazing, I wish we could do that too, versus someone going, you're doing what?
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, cool. I've just sorry. I want to talk about identity.
Yes.
So, because I'm curious, you said that that you had the whole thing of you've been working in radio, and it was Shandra, the person who works in radio. I don't know who the real Shandra is, really, right? Because it's all of the stuff that goes with it, with the job and the role. Did you go straight into, how did you know that you wanted to be a coach? Like, what did that just kind of land, or did you percolate on it, as you said? No. How did that come about?
So I made the decision to leave the job, and at that time my youngest sister was living in London. Yeah. And so I decided that I would take a trip to go and visit her, and it was kind of just going to be a bit of a circuit breaker and some reflection time. So I went over and had conversations with her, and just was in a very different kind of space and environment for a while. And I was thinking about, well, what did I had a pretty rapid rise in radio, in terms of I was getting promoted every 18 months. Like, it was just kind of like boom, and the results that I was getting were really great. So it was like, okay, so obviously I was doing quite a lot right, but what were the bits that I loved the best? Okay. And what does that tell me? And so I was just extracting the bits out, and it kept coming back, and the theme was always around people development, whether it was the on-air team, whether it was the marketing team, or whoever, of helping them to get better at their job, to feel happier, improving their communication, and whatever that looked like for them. They were the things that, when I looked back, amongst everything, that I felt were most professionally rewarding. So that made me think, well, what jobs exist where you can do that? And so that's when I found out that coaching existed as a profession, because it was relatively new back then, in Australia anyway. And so then I was like, oh, well, maybe I want to become a coach, but I don't know. Do I? I don't know. So I enrolled in a training course to do it, like an introductory course. And then I was in and I was hooked. And so, you know, I did the introductory course, and then I did the advanced course, then I did the diploma, then I did the mastermind. It was like, I had to do it all. And I think because of that, then basically, you know, you get spat out ready to be a coach. So I don't know that I actually made the conscious decision, this is definitely what I want to do, but I followed my passion and my curiosity, knowing that what I was going to learn, even if I didn't do it professionally, it would help me personally. So I felt like that was a good path to go down and explore. But it's an interesting one, because I think for a lot of people, if they are at that kind of crossroads, it can be like, well, what am I going to do? And how do you figure that out? And there's different ways that you can do that. But I think following the curiosity path, and things that you feel like you're good at and you enjoy, and then you look for the overlaps of pieces of the puzzle, I think.
Yeah, sure. Do you call yourself a coach now? Or don't you have a title? Because that's what kind of where I was going to go with the identity thing. Like, how important is it to?
Not so much. And I think I mainly talk about what I do through talking about who I help, rather than saying my title or my label. But you know, there's times where you got to fill in forms, and you know, so sometimes I'll write a business coach or consultant, or I'll refer to myself as the CEO of the Transit Lounge.
Sure.
And I have my own business, that kind of thing. But I don't think I've ever really been someone that cared too much about titles. And in a business sense, us talking about a role title is more talking about ourselves, whereas what's more effective is often talking about who you work with. And
I was just curious, because you know, you said so much of your first career was about who am I. Like, I wondered how important it was for you now, to whether that was still important, like to have roles and responsibilities.
Oh, right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and like, yeah, how that can shape us. And
well, one of the things I've learned since the Nova days about identity is that there's actually, as human beings, we have 7 different types of beliefs. I won't talk about all of them, but one of them is identity beliefs. And that is essentially anything that we believe about ourselves. So whenever you answer or finish the sentence, I am, or I can, I can't, I never, I always, they are identity statements. So you want to be very curious and careful about how you use that language, because you're labeling that as who you see yourself as being. Another type of belief is called a vehicle belief, and that is more about what you do with your time. How do you express who you are? So that's career, hobbies, groups, etc. And what often happens is that our identity and our vehicle beliefs get overlapped. Okay. And that's why we have these crises of identity, because extracting those two parts isn't something we necessarily think about. We just think about them as muddled all as one. So I think I try for myself and for my clients to extract. There is the identity of who you are and who you want to be and strive to be and aim to be. And then there's the stuff that you do, and they are related but not the same. Okay.
And can those two things then, once you've kind of untangled them, can you kind of go, these are the things I like about the things I do, and this is my identity, and then use those and put them back together to create the ideal career or the ideal business? Or
so you don't necessarily
help bring together the dream?
I think the you want alignment of between how you see yourself and what you do, because sometimes what can happen is you can see yourself through a certain lens and believe that, oh, I'm someone, and we'll use this, I'm someone who's I'm a healthy person. I'm healthy. That's an identity belief. But if your behavior is that you eat junk food all the time and you never exercise, then you can tell yourself that you're healthy all you like, but your actions are not demonstrating that. And so you've got a conflict there, and that tends to feel uncomfortable to people, because and there's other beliefs as well that that I had to address around my workaholism. And, you know, what I said was really important to me from a values perspective. And when you have those moments of realizing the disconnect, you have the choice of going, well, do I want to stop telling myself that I'm healthy so I can keep eating whatever?
Yeah.
Or do I need to actually change my behaviors to be in line with the kind of person that I am and really want to be? And so they are complementary tools that you can use to either realize what you've been prioritizing versus what you want to prioritize, and then make decisions about, well, what are you prepared to shift?
And so do you use those techniques inside your business with your clients?
Yeah, sometimes, you know, because all of this really falls under the banner of mindset, and that mindset, and the mindset that I encourage my clients to step into is being the mindset of being CEO of brand you, of your whole life, and what you do with that, and whether you're living a life that feels aligned and sustainable and fulfilling and all of those things or not, because no one else can actually make those decisions or take that action for you. And so by getting more self-aware of what is, you know, who is this identity that I want to have and believe that I can create, and then what's the action that supports and demonstrates that I'm living in line with that, and how do I, you know, tweak and refine. And part of the action is, what am I doing with my work life? Because if you're doing something for your work that is not fulfilling, then ultimately it's going to undermine how satisfied and you know, meaningful you feel like your life is. And that's, again, another reason where these career crossroads of people saying, well, I used to love being an architect and it paid me really well, but I never want to design another house as long as I live. I want to help women move their body and feel great about themselves, and I'm going to go and start this thing over here. And that's freaking hard, but that feels like joy. That feels like who I really am. It feels like I can show up as my entirety in that. Over here, there's a slice of me. I can do that, but it's not necessarily what I should be doing.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna well, this is kind of along the same track, and you touched on it briefly, is when you you know, you consider yourself a healthy person. You are a healthy person, but then you got adrenal fatigue because of your workaholism, right? So how did that sit with you? Were you surprised? Because I think as a healthy person, and, you know, speaking as a healthy person as well, it would be a big shock to be told that you're actually really unhealthy, because adrenal fatigue's pretty rough, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty, like, you've been really hammering yourself to get adrenal fatigue.
Yeah.
How did that feel? Were you like, no, I'm not that bad? Like, what?
I think it's an interesting one, because I think I knew that something was wrong, because I was getting sick all the time. I'd get a cold or a flu, and then that'd hang around for a couple of weeks, and then I'd just get over that, and then I'd get a cold sore, or then I'd get over that, and then I'd have some other, you know, other thing going on. It just felt like I just kept having this run. I was like, this isn't right. It isn't normal. Something's not right. And so that's when I went to see my naturopath, and she suspected straight away, because she knew of me and how I worked. And so she said, we're going to do this test, and it's a saliva test that you do. And anyway, long story. And it basically measures your cortisol at different points in the day. And so when I went back and got the results, she pretty much said, unless on the day that you did those tests, you were at some sort of silent retreat, didn't get out of bed or communicate with any other human being that whole day, essentially what this tells us is your adrenals have run out of the ability to produce cortisol, because you've been operating at this level for so long. They've just now gone kaput.
See you later.
Yeah. And when she talked to me about that, it was like, oh, and I remember feeling relieved that, oh, there is something wrong. I'm not just being a wuss. And, you know, like, literally there's that kind of, that's the workaholic voice, right? It's not just me being lazy. And so it was like relief about that, and that there was, you know, a reason for it. I also remember feeling relieved that it wasn't something worse. because my family have a history of chronic fatigue.
Oh,
Like the next phase beyond that. So I was like, right, well, this is my opportunity that I can make changes, because if I don't, I'm going to end up in chronic fatigue land. And so I think there was that sense of relief at the diagnosis. And my naturopath said to me, she said, look, this is not just this year or this job that has created this. This is you years and years and years of overworking at such a level under perceived stress that your body just can't cope with. Wow. And she said, it's a long time coming and it's a long time healing. I didn't really like hearing that answer, but yeah, it was true.
Wow. And what did you have to do to heal?
So went to Bali, and
how long for?
Only a week or so, and came back and decided that I was going to drop down my hours at work. I was going, so this is my wellness plan, right? My 5 points with my bonus 6 point. And when I told my naturopath about the wellness plan and the bonus point, she said, why do you have to just overachieve even with your wellness plan? I'm like, oh yeah, good point. Anyway, so I tried dropping down to 4 days a week, and that was ridiculous. I do not recommend it to anyone. The workplace I was working with made me have Tuesdays off.
You probably end up just doing more in 4 days.
I did. Yeah. And so I basically took a pay cut and then just worked harder on the 4 days. I was like, that wasn't smart. So that's when I kind of tried that for a couple of months, and then I just thought, this is just not working. And that's when I decided I'm going to pull the pin and not work anymore and with them and start the business. So yeah, that's how that process unfolded. And then it was in parallel to that, it was like really I had to look at my way of working, and trying to adjust that wasn't going to make significant enough change to improve my health. And so then it was like, right, well, I've got to pull the pin on that so I can reinvent the way that I work and what I do. And some people thought I was mental for starting my own business when I've got adrenal fatigue. But in my head, it made sense, because I thought, well, at least if it's my own business, I can decide how much I want to work, or I can say no to things, I can limit things. And so it sort of made sense in my head. But not everybody would recommend it necessarily. Yeah. And then a whole lot of on the health side of things, of diet related and new, like supplement related and things like that. And that I also at that time did a 8-week MBSR program, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Okay.
And I loved that program, and that really set me up to develop what I still have now as what I call a daily-ish meditation practice. And so I'm a big advocate for my mindfulness practice as a big part of my road to recovery.
Yeah, sure. Wow. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? So having your own business, right? Is it hard to not work all the time because you love it so much?
Yes.
Is it different?
Totally.
And is it different?
It is different. It's different because I genuinely really love what I'm doing now. And so I think energetically that feels different to being in a role that's demanding, where stuff just has to get done. And that definitely is what my last job, evolved to, it was way away from the human development side of things that it was meant to be originally. So in my own business, it is really hard. And, the fact that I can choose my own hours, sometimes that will mean, that I'll just keep working on the weekends. If I don't have plans, it's like, oh, I can smash out these things. So I would say it is a continuing project for me to look at my boundaries and, to be trying to catch myself when I'm dropping into that overworking. So I think it will probably be a long kind of process for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess one of the reasons it feels more fulfilling is because of the people you work with, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And you probably feel more valued as well.
Yeah.
yeah, it can be hard if you feel like you're just an employee over time, and it's just not the same, is it? Because you build quite strong relationships and connections with the people you work with.
Yeah, and I think also that, you know, having your own business, you are responsible for choosing the direction that that business goes in. When you're an employee, generally there's a CEO and an executive team and maybe a board and whatever, and they're making all these decisions, which often at an employee level you only know part of, and you're just there to implement the strategy without the same level of buy-in. I mean, depending on what your role is. Whereas you know, there's clients that I work with who started their business thinking, I'm going to offer this, 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 and this, and here's what for, and they get started, and then they realize, oh, I don't love that as much as I thought, or that's, you know, way too demanding time-wise, that I don't want to give that much time. So they go, well, I'm not going to offer that anymore. I'm going to focus over here. In your own business, you can make those choices whenever you want and go, well, I don't do that anymore. Just like that. You don't have to have a consultation with, you know, 10 board members and wait for it to get approval and signed off here and blah, blah, blah. You just call your own shots. It is not easy. There's a lot of challenges when you're working for yourself. So I don't want to be pretending that it's all hearts and flowers. But from a locus of control, when you have your own business, you do have so much more of an empowered position to be in, to make decisions about what's working for you and what's not, and what can you tweak, what will you change, and evolve it to suit you, whether that's a life stage thing or you know, there's travel that you want to do, or what that looks like. And that for me, like, freedom and flexibility is very high on my values. So for me, that's really important, to have that ability to call my own shots and not be having to implement somebody else's plan.
Yeah, just seems ridiculous, doesn't it, that we do all of these things. I feel bad even sending my kids to school, because I'm like, I'm just putting you in the system.
Yeah,
and we've been there and we know it's not right. But I'm doing it anyway.
No, tick the box.
We're closing in on our hour together. And so I was going to ask you a bit more, just a few closing, a couple of closing questions about your business and what you do. I guess in terms of, I think that there are probably women out there that maybe like have a dream of doing the thing, changing their direction, or asking themselves, what is this all about? Mm-hmm. Are there any tips that you would give to those women? Any advice and any sort of starting points? Probably coming to see you would be a good one.
I can do that. I think it depends what stage they're at with the feeling and the idea. I think, you know, I often think that it goes in phases where you have the consideration phase, is what I call it, which is that zone of discontent of whatever's happening now or has been happening is not what I see myself doing for, you know, an extended future. And so I want to do something different. But there's a point that you have to get to, which is there something different, just a different job with a different company, or, you know, changing to get a job in a different industry? Like, is that the change that you're looking for? Or is it actually, no, I want to go down this business direction? Because there's that as a decision is very powerful to make. Otherwise, you kind of can flip-flop between, I don't know, I'm just unhappy and maybe I want to do this, but maybe not. And you need to have a level of commitment to being in business to push through the inevitable challenges. So I think that decision point is an important one. So if you're not at that stage, then keep journaling, reflecting, work with a coach, have conversations to explore, you know, which one of these pathways is going to, you know, light you up the most. So that's the zone of consideration. And then once you've made the decision about, okay, I want to go this way, then it comes down to what's the idea? Like, for the business, what actually do you want to be doing in the business or offering? Is it a product business or a service business? What is the actual idea? And for many of the clients I work with, and also, I did 40 interviews with women who changed career to start a business after the age of 40. And so many of them shared with me that they had their business idea for years, literally years. Do you know the swag, the fresh produce bag that, it's like anyway, it's brilliant product. Peter, who is the creator and inventor of that, she had that idea for I think she said like 6 or 7 years. It just wouldn't go away. And so it just got to the point where she was like, I've got to just give it a go just so that I can move it on, or, it's either going to do something or get it out of my brain. And many other examples of women that have said, I had this little idea for blah, blah, blah. Or, you know what, if I could, one day I would love to blah, blah, blah. So if someone's listening to this and they've got any of that, then it's like, right, how could I explore that a little bit more about what that might look like? Playing that game of what does the future you look like if that little idea gets, nurtured and grows, because you want to have something. No one else, I don't think, can tell you, here's your business idea, here's what you should go and do. People can tell you that, but unless it really aligns with what you want and believe in, then potentially at the first hurdle or the second hurdle, you'll just bail because it's hard. Whereas if it's your idea and you're really committed and excited about it and you believe in the impact it will have, you're more likely to tap into that resilience to want to figure out the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to just kind of throw in the towel. I care about this outcome, and that's going to help me get through the challenges that will come as I step more and more in that direction.
Cool.
They're probably the first phases of thoughts that I would share.
Yeah. Do you ever come across women that you just tell them to just go for it if they're in that kind of, or do you just leave it up to them?
I tend
because I'd be like, just go for it.
Yeah, I'm always going to be on the go for it bandwagon.
Yeah.
However, people need to be, self-driven to a certain
empowered
degree
to know that they've made the decision.
Yes, to do it. But the other thing that I will always say is, if there's someone and they suspect this might be something that they want to do, then I would encourage them to get started. Get started as a side business, as, just baby steps, doing some business foundation. Get started way before you think you're ready, because things generally take a lot longer than you think they will. And by getting started, you can test it out. You can test to see, well, what actually is this thing that I'm offering? And do people even want it anyway? And if they do, how much will they charge for it? And all of the things just open up. But you want to be able to move in that direction to then know, oh, this is the next step. I need to ask this question, or I need to, go and do this research, or flesh this out, or do some research around costings or software or whatever the thing is. Get started, because you getting started and bringing an experimental mindset, you're going to learn way faster than sitting back and waiting for something to just fall perfectly formed out of the sky into your brain before you get started. So I definitely am someone who would be having a bias towards action. If you're even a little bit curious, give it a go. Get started in a low risk way, rather than I'm quitting my job and going off and doing this. You got to know your own motivation style. For some people, the rip it off like a Band-Aid method works. But for most of us, we need a little bit of financial security and a little bit of certainty about what we're doing before we jump right in. But yeah, I'm a fan of take the action, get the feedback, tweak, take the action.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Closing words from you, Shandra. What does the future hold for you? Where do you see yourself in the future Shandra?
Yes, future Shandra is doing very similar to what present Shandra is doing, which is great. However, just continuing to expand my business and the number of women that I work with. And that's partly where the group program came in, was that I can max out with the number of private clients that I can work with. And so the group program allows me to work with more women, you know, in a group environment. So growing that is definitely in future Chandra's life. And also I know I have not nutted all of it out yet, but I know that in the future I want to be running retreats, because what I've recognized is that it can be quite tricky to do some of this reflection and planning and visioning when you're in your day-to-day life. So I know that and potentially maybe weekend retreats, maybe a 5-day, something like that. Got a few destinations in mind. So yeah, that's definitely
yeah, that sounds great.
Exciting project for the future.
Fun.
Stay tuned.
Beauty. We're going to share links for all of your things in the notes here. We've just gone over our hour, which is all right. I'm not a control freak much. I just appreciate that you've put this time aside for us, and it's been a really insightful conversation. And yeah, I love talking about all of these things and seeing things from a different perspective as well, because, you know, I do well, we know that we get to that time in our lives and we do start to wonder what it's all about. And yeah, hearing it from the perspective of, you know, you can do something completely different and start afresh is really cool. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time, and it's great to see you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I really love talking with you, and thank you for helping me reflect back on, you know, on Shandra, how I got where I am.
No worries. I'll see you soon.
See ya.